It's really the simplest question. What is success for the Utah Jazz this season? It's next on Locked on Jazz. Bum 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 pow.
You are Locked on Jazz, your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
How are you? I'm David Locke, radio voice of the Utah Jazz, Jazz NBA insider. Today on Locked on Jazz, what is success from the players, from the front office, from the coaches, from the fans? And what should success be built on? Off the day of the Donovan Mitchell, Rudy Gobert trades, or off of last year's gutty, gritty, scrappy season of the Utah Jazz? We'll discuss that. Then Tim LaComb stops by and joins us for his third and final edition of the offseason interview series, talking about the Jazz and the rest of the NBA. I am David Locke, radio voice of the Utah Jazz, Jazz NBA insider, and this is Locked on Jazz, your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz, giving you insight, expertise, geeky numbers, and hopefully making it way better to be a Jazz fan each and every day. We are free and available on all podcasting apps, as well as on YouTube. Thank you to everyone who subscribes and follows, and those 5-star reviews are greatly appreciated on both Spotify as well as on Apple. Thank you very much for all of those who have done that for us and left one of those reviews. And thank you for making Locked on Jazz the first listen of every single day. And to the everydayers that are out there, we super appreciate you. We'll be back to every day here very, very shortly. Here's the plan. I do want to give this to you. Just kind of give everyone the update. So I am going to take one last little vacation. I've done a few of these. Go visit my son and my daughter before the season starts. It's the schedule came out, and it is not advantageous to parents seeing children. We leave December 19th and come back December 29th, and my kids kind of come into town on right around the 18th. So I see him for like a day during Christmas this year. So I'm going to go see my son and spend some time there. And then I'm going to go see my daughter over back at college for a few minutes, and then get ready to go to Hawaii for the season. So that's the plan. So just wanted to let you know. So Leaf is going to take the show twice this week and 3 times next week. And then we'll be back to 5 days a week with training camp starting. So hope that makes sense to everyone. All right. Thank you for the latest review from E. Bardsley. I really enjoy listening to David's unique take and look at the Jazz. The geeky numbers make it all the better, especially in the day when statistics and analytics are such a vital part of sports. Keep up the great work. Thank you very much. Appreciate it, E. Bardsley. All right. So what's success? I've been thinking about this. We've done all these interviews and done all this stuff. And like, what is success this year? And like, success to whom, I think, is the most interesting question. So I think success to the coaches and the players probably might even be different. Coaches in front office, I think, is perfectly aligned. The organization's in a really good place with that. Ryan's done some nice things there to make sure that's the case. And then the players are interesting, right? Because you go look at each guy's a little bit. Like Colin Sexton last year, the whole season was about getting Colin Sexton to the finish line and that knee. And so, you know, Colin Sexton's version of success is probably very different than what, you know, somebody else's. Taylor Horton-Tucker's in a free agent year. Kelly Olynyk's in a free agent year. Those have an impact, right? Taylor Hendricks, Keontae George, and Bryce Sensabaugh are in a different spot than somebody else. So what a player's version and what the players collectively, and they always believe, the beautiful thing about players is, you know, they all think they're good enough to get done whatever they need to get done. And that's a beautiful aspect of what makes players kind of who they are, and as successful as they are. They absolutely believe 100% all the time in their own. From a fan standpoint, I think it's a really interesting question of what is success. Like if I were to ask you right now, what is success? And I'd love it if someone wanted to put in the YouTube comment section what they think their success is for the season for the Jazz, because I'm about to lead you into what I think it is for me personally, but I'd love to get your comments first. So feel free if you want to just hit pause and hit me on Twitter at or X at DLock09. That would be fine. Also, if you're not on the YouTube and you're on the majority of our audience is still on audio. What is success? So what I think is an interesting question is when you look at the success, are you building off of last year's club that was the hard playing, gutsy, scrappy, kind of grabbed our attention and our imagination of what's possible, gave us this blissful, fun, expectations-free year? Or are you building your success off of where we were after the Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert trade? So that's where I am. I never expected this process from the day that we traded Donovan and Rudy and embarked upon this journey of trying to build a championship team, and really the feeling that with Rudy's contract and Donovan's either situation or maybe, the difficulty in keeping him, that was a path that clearly the decision was made that was not the path to a championship. And the decision was also made, I think really interestingly, that just winning 50 games and being really good wasn't acceptable. Like that clearly was the decision made by Danny and Ryan and Justin Zanuck that was not a path they were interested in taking. So the path they're on is one to truly win a championship. Like that's crazy hard. You've got to get lucky. Something's got to happen. I've said this a million times that if I owned a team and I ran a team, I wouldn't have enough guts to do that. I would go with the 50 wins, be top 4 in my conference. If I can get lucky and something breaks my way, that's pretty cool. But I wouldn't have the guts to go try to pull that off. It's really hard. So if I go back to that day, which is where I think I build off of what success I will build up for me personally, I build it off that day. And so I would look at success as being a productive environment for players to develop and play in a culture to be built. That's so esoteric and boring. But like I think of some things I've seen out of the Houston Rockets in the past few years. That's not that. That wasn't that. Now it might be with Ime Udoka now, but it wasn't prior, right? That was just free-flowing basketball, and there wasn't structure, and didn't seem to be a lot of that doesn't work. The Philadelphia 76ers in the opening years of the process, that wasn't productive environment by which players improve, develop, and a culture is built. So that would be the first one. So that really gets down to some really simple things. Like, can they play as hard as they did last year? Like the thing about them last year is that every night they played hard, every single night. And if someone came out and didn't play hard, they just got them, right? They got New Orleans twice, if not 3 times early in the season last year, where New Orleans just kind of was cool for school and coasted into a game, and the Jazz jumped them. And the next thing you know, they were in for a dogfight, and the Jazz were like that. To me, is success, is those first 2 things. And then that should lead to a bunch of player development. This is really the first year in which we're playing with players we selected. Now, Walker and Ochai were fabulous, but they came over in the trade, and we didn't have anything to do with the picks. They just happened to be the players we got in our trades. Turned out to be great. Walker, really could be really, really good. He's got big strides to make. But like Walker doesn't, as I heard someone say, Walker doesn't get better just by being a year older. So Walker's got to get better. So that would be the third thing, is that the core pieces of this puzzle that are beginning to develop, and there's going to be, like, let's be perfectly clear about what the process over the next 5 years is going to be. There's going to be like 25 core pieces to the puzzle, and 5 of them are going to last. Like, look at Denver. 2 of them lasted. Jamal Murray and Nikola Jokic are the only 2 that lasted, and then they just kept moving the pieces, and they got themselves a championship. And that's what this is. So the third part to me that success this year would be that you're seeing growth out of those players. Now that gets funky. Like, well, how does Kelly Olynyk feel about that? And how does Jordan Clarkson feel about that? And, they're not on the same timeline as a Lowry Markkanen, Colin Sexton, John Collins, Talen Horton, Tucker, Ochai, Agbaji timeline. Like we have kind of that group. And then we have the 3 draft picks that are all 19. And those players are the ones that, like, they're going to have their Jordan Clarkson and Kelly Olynyk are 30-year-old veteran players who, hopefully are a large part of why it's a productive environment for which people develop, by which they play hard. And then there's the really interesting one. Like Chris Dunn's playing for his entire career in preseason. He's an unrestricted, he's non-guaranteed. Luka Samanic in his second chance, playing a little bit for his entire career. Luka Samanic is a little bit more on the timeline of the younger guys. If he suddenly, you just don't, like, if he puts it together, that's a 6'10" body that can run and move and do a lot of things. It's pretty great. And Chris Dunn's 29. So we'll see. And even Yurtseven, who we don't talk about a lot, is 25 as well, signed for 2 years. Like, maybe that's a little piece of the puzzle. And if you go back and look, by the way, at Danny Ainge over the career, when he built, he moved a ton of players, but Marcus Smart stayed forever and Kendrick Perkins stayed forever. It's not always obvious who the player is that stays forever for Danny and the ones that fit his culture and what he wants as a franchise. So to me, that's what I would deem success. But from your standpoint as a fan, maybe it's 50 wins, maybe it's 45 wins, maybe it's a win improvement, maybe those are the things that might be most important to you. For me, I think it's just this kind of continual development and process and progress in a much larger 5 to 6 year window that we embarked upon the day Donovan and Rudy traded. And we got a much more exhilarating first year than we ever anticipated. But I still think we're in that capsule by which we find out who we are. So I don't know, be curious about your thoughts. I'll go back and read the YouTube comments and the rest. Tim LaComb's going to join us here in just a minute and continue our interview series. Special thanks to T. LaComb. You can hit him at Twitter at T. LaComb. Please send a thank you to Tony and to Sarah and to Ben. They're also generous with their time for our off-season interview series. And Leaf will take us home this next week, and then I'll be back with you, and we'll start our whole previews of points gained and 240 minutes and all the things down the league. I'll be doing a lot of that while I'm not doing shows this week. Today's show, by the way, is brought to you by Murdoch Hyundai, located at 4646 South State Street, also located in Logan and in Linden. I am driving one of the new Santa Fe's. It's a little sporty, zippier. It's got a little bounce to it. Love it. It's been really, really fun. My kids both have Santa Fe's from various iterations. I guess my son's is now 6 years old, and my daughter's is now 3 years old. It's been a great car for us. I also got the Ioniq 5 at home, which is the SUV of the year. The Ioniq 6 is the other electric. So the Hyundai lineup of cars, absolutely fabulous, and the Murdochs are there for you with the no-regret experience. If you're going to head over to one of the stores, please email me first at dlock09@gmail.com so I can set you up with the Locked On VIP experience, whether it's Murray, Linden, or Logan. If you can tell me in the email, that would be great. I'd super appreciate it because that gives me a better chance to serve you the best. That's all at Murdoch Hyundai, located at 4646 South State Street, also located in Logan and in Linden. Today's show is also brought to you by FanDuel. FanDuel, hopefully you did not participate in that. What was it? The Rams or someone kicked a field goal the other day and got people on the wrong side. Like a weird Sean McVay move. Anyway, FanDuel is America's #1 sports book. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you play a $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in the action than now. The app is easy to use. Wide-ranging betting options include spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/locked-on. That's FanDuel.com/locked-on for America's #1 sportsbook and the official sportsbook of the Locked On Podcast Network. And by the way, you get a no sweat first bet, $1,000 up to $1,000 back. That's literally when you sign into FanDuel.com/locked-on. It'll set that up right there for you. By the way, they also have a bunch of NBA props at FanDuel, so you can jump in on all the NBA props. My random NBA prop of the day there. And they have a bunch of baseball stuff if you're getting into that as well. They have WNBA playoffs as well, which is much more the Liberty favored by 10.5 and the Wings by 6.5. The Aces are the team. Opening night of the NBA season's up on the board. The Jazz first game is against Sacramento, and we are a 1.5-point underdog on opening night. Third day with Tim LaComb. Send him a thank you at T. LaComb on the X/Twitter. We appreciate him taking the time with us. Catch him with Jake Scott all year long, with Jamil Hawkins on the controls as our executive producer this year. He'll be our pre-halftime and post-game show. It's a great show on the radio broadcast, so make sure you catch it on the KSL Sports Zone. He's Tim LaComb, longtime BYU coach. Might have started his sports career as an intern for various radio station back. I don't know, and who the nutty program director was. Maybe stories to be told, maybe not.
I'm just glad we're doing this. I'm not in the same because I see you and I dodge pencils, man.
Pencils.
Remember how you had the pencils and then they had that cloth wall, and you would throw your pen, you get mad and it would stick in the wall. It's like, not only is he like really smart, but when he gets mad, he can even maintain a pencil in the wall. Like
my least good moment was the carts.
Yeah.
Those plastic carts. They didn't bounce really well.
No, they shatter.
They shattered.
Yeah, we had some fun though, man, and I knew right away. I'm able to spot greatness. That was one of my calling cards as a coach, is to see great ability.
And so that's why you got out of radio and you went into coaching?
No, I saw great ability in you, my friend.
Oh, I thought it was that you saw what lunatics worked in radio and you decided that you need to go be around Dave Rose and greatness.
No, I just remember people saying, you got to listen to this new dude, and flipped it on. I was like, all right, yeah, he and I speak similar language. So I recognize greatness.
Then he went to go work with Rick Majerus for a long time, and then with Dave Rose and a bunch of great coaches. So he's nice to have us with us. All right. One of my favorite moments of the year, I've talked about this, I think, with Tony and Sarah, was the story about Will in the film room saying to everyone, like, you guys know Lowry's our best player, right? Like, Lowry kind of having to be like, oh, I guess I'm our best player. So Lowry now goes to an offseason, a unique one, where he probably needs some rest with the military and the World Cup. But does Lowry make a jump this year? Because he enters the year having a different feel on who he is as a player.
Yeah, that's always an interesting, when you go from down the scouting report or just part of the scouting report to, the head of the snake, as we used to call it, the one guy that everybody knows, hey, we got to shut this dude down if we're going to win. And I think the proof is in the pudding this year. I think that it's going to be a jump that he's going to have to make, that all great players do. And obviously he saw way more attention as the year went on last year. But I remember early in the season, a particular interview where there was that talk of who's the number one option. And early in the season, when everybody kind of wanted it to be Lowry, but it was still working itself out, I remember Will saying it specifically, that's not something that you just anoint, you allow that to take place. I made a little note of that. I remember when he said something to that effect. And then it wasn't much later that, we got word that, okay, this is who they're going to play through just by virtue of what we watch. Man, I'll tell you what, the thing that stands out to me, David, about him is I knew he was really skilled, but I had no idea the toughness. The way that he just night in and night out just went in there and banged. He's not afraid of contact. He throws his body around, and he did have an unbelievably good year. All that being said, long answer, I think he does make a little bit of a jump. Because I think he's that good. I think he's proven that time and time again, and I think that there'll be a guy that even though he's well thought of now, I think he'll make a little bit of a jump this year.
If you decide Shea's already made the jump, that Shea's already in the top 15 players in the NBA, I see 4 guys that have a chance to get in the top 15 players in the NBA: Lowry, LaMelo, Anthony Edwards, and Donovan. Now, Donovan, I don't know that Donovan would be better than he was last year. I mean, he was pretty great. The other 3 are all physically bigger than the other people that play their position. Like Anthony Edwards is the middle linebacker. LaMelo is really big for that position, and Lowry's big, which I think is a huge advantage. Which of those 4 do you think is most likely to make a jump, or any of them, into the top 15?
Edwards, he had a nice run. FIBA didn't end up well for the whole team, but I thought he was kind of one of the Bulldog bright spots. And I think he's poised to make one. I think it's going to be a huge year for the T-Wolves. I mean, as many questions as there are, you talk about these aging veterans and how they've just kind of had a place up there in the top number of players. I think all that's starting to kind of slide, and young guys are starting to make their entry. I would say probably out of that group, I'd probably say Edwards or Lowry would be the 2 guys that I would say, and probably Edwards just because of, he's a guy who is well thought of, but he hasn't quite made the move Lowry made last year, I don't think. I think that's something that we'll maybe see on the heels of a great summer for him.
Is there something in Lowry's game that gets him there?
I think being a little bit more consistent from three. I think that because the thing that he does so well, he gets himself to the line, as all great scorers do, and he can score from a variety of different ways. He's great out in the open floor. He's got the ability to run the floor. You can throw the ball to him and he can make a play off the bounce. And then, his ability to kind of finish in that mid-range, or the power move above the rim. He's got kind of both of those things. So I think that's a guy that can pretty much do everything. It'll be interesting to see how defenses counter to him and see what other things are opened up because of the respect that he gains.
Let's talk about John Collins. We talked about him in the very first episode this week. So one of the things was, like you talk about the free throws with Lowry, I give Will a lot of that credit. Like that's a lot of that face cutting that Lowry was doing off the pin down, where if they tried to switch it, he just took the smaller guy across. There were some real movement things. What are those same? Are there same things that Will can do with John Collins? In that same fashion.
Yeah, I think there are. And I haven't seen a ton of Collins other than what we've seen of him. But he's always a guy that I wrote. Like I love his explosion in athleticism. I like his ability to finish plays. He is a guy that, if he's going to be as good as he needs to be and the team is going to gain the bump that they can from him, he's got to be able to shoot the ball better from three. I mean, that's a given. But I think he will. That's going to be something you or I are going to have a milkshake on, or something that I got to set a number, because I think he's going to get to a number. But I think those two things, his ability, then it's just Will using him. Like you mentioned, those wide pin downs he got Lowry coming off of. Unique for a 6'11" guy, particularly when he's got a big guy chasing him. And how many times do we see Lowry just really turn the corner with a full head of steam, able to make a play? I think that's what he'll do for John. But maybe some post isolation, because I think John is a guy that can turn and face and create off the bounce. And then just what kind of things can you free him up with in transition, that maybe he wasn't getting prior? So lots of different angles and ways to look at it, but Will have a lot to work with John Collins. But probably the number one thing he's got to try to get to is get his confidence up.
Does a switch of a team make that easier, or does it make it more angst laden? I mean, that's the question, right? Like, is he like? It'll be interesting to see. Is the fresh start? I guess is what everyone wants to believe it is. You need that success early, or that fresh start then becomes the opposite.
Well, we saw that with Mike Conley, right? His first year here, everybody wanted it so bad for him, and he had such a hard time getting in a rhythm. And it wasn't because guys were bad here; it's a different situation. You're getting perhaps the ball differently than you've gotten, and that's one thing to consider. Scheme changes, we look at them as all real positive, but they're different for him. So you make a good point. I think him coming in here, I think the veterans, and the locker room seems to be in a good place. I think this summer, and just watching him in and around the team, it'll be an interesting transition. But the Jazz made this move, knowing that they got a really good player who's maybe a little bit down, and hopefully, like with Lowry, they can just help a couple of different things. Just help his confidence and get him playing better.
He's Tim LaComb, and we're going to both talk about our favorite player next. That's what I can promise you. So we'll be talking about our favorite player on the Jazz. Are we allowed to have favorites? Sure. We can have a favorite when it's this guy. We'll be talking about how he fits in next, what he does, and how you rotate and what they do around him, as we continue here on Locked On Jazz.
Today's show is brought to you by Jace Medical. Everyone able to be prepared. Don't get caught unprepared. Everyone should be empowered to take care of themselves, their loved ones during the unexpected. Jace Medical handles everything from online evaluation to licensed pharmacy to medication delivery and ongoing consultation and care. So, all right, so how does this work? The Jace case provides 5 life-saving antibiotics for emergency use. All it takes to get a Jace case is to fill out a simple online form, and in some cases, jump on a call with one of our board-certified physicians. Get ongoing care from our physicians and any treatment-related questions. Doctor-created, doctor-recommended. It's interesting. You get these clients and you learn about Jace, And then I'm actually in a conversation this weekend with a buddy of mine who lives in the East Coast, and they get these hurricanes coming through, like the one that came from Maine. And, all their power lines are above ground. So like when Sandy came through, they were 14 days without power. Well, what happens if you need one of your antibiotics? What happens if something's about to run out? You're not getting, the gas stations, if they don't have pumps, like they're not, that is the circumstances we're running into. So you got that supply chain shortage, that natural disaster, that travel, a pandemic of some, these are the things that happen. So with these things all taking place, you need to be prepared. And Jace Medical is simple. Go online, fill out a form, and then you get a prescription of life-saving medications right to your door. The Jace case gives you peace of mind so that you are not hoping that you have access to medication in an emergency, making sure you actually have it. Save more than $360 by getting life-saving antibiotics with Jace Medical, plus an additional $20 off by using the code LOCKEDON at checkout on Jace Medical. That's JASE medical.com. JASE medical.com.
So Nikola Jokic wins an NBA title. In the Summer League, every team decides to start running the ball through their big. How do the Jazz use Kelly Olynyk this year?
Well, I thought they did a great job last year. I mean, I was looking because I do run into fans that I struggle when they say, oh, Kelly, we should have moved Kelly, or we should have kept Bojan, or Kelly was really, really vital to everything we did last year, and was one of those pieces out there that allowed you to kind of be able to do some of the things you did personnel-wise because he's so versatile. He was 100 in the league in points, 51st in rebounds, and 63rd in assists. Just a guy that does a little bit of everything. But, man, he does the things that impact winning. I saw it for all those years. One of the great Kelly Olynyk stories, I was at BYU. We were playing Gonzaga, and it was a game. We were playing them a game. Kelly was redshirting this particular year. So he was in street clothes standing under the basket, and they had, like, if I remember right, Robert Sacre and a bunch of other guys that had come through there and gone to the pros. Danny Ainge and Austin Ainge were at the game. And I was talking to them prior, and I said, who do you think their best pro prospect is down there? Thinking it was going to be one of the guys we were actually going to face that night. And they disappointed me when they said it's the guy in the bow tie. And this Kelly Olynyk was down there, and they said, you wait till you watch this guy play, kind of jack of all trades, great soft hands, great soft touch, but above all else, just knows how to play. And I learned that the hard way and tried to defend and mess with that guy through the years. But he just does a little bit of everything. And I think the Jazz continue to utilize him. I mean, he's one of those guys that allows you to play. Can you imagine a lineup with he and John and Lowry out there? Because that obviously could be really, really prevalent, but skilled, versatile big guys. And to me, Kelly is one of the funnest guys to watch just because he does a little everything.
Can you play 5 out and have him the way Denver did? Like, can you play him in that mid-high elbow post with 4 shooters and play out of that?
Yeah, I mean, the key there, you got to be able to get a catch. He can do that, be able to turn and face and have the respect that you can actually do something off the bounce. We've seen him do that. But it's really his vision, his innate understanding of how the game's played, where guys are going to be. He just makes really good decisions. And so, yeah, I think you could totally do that.
My favorite Kelly comment that someone had to me is, he's unscoutable because he actually doesn't know what he'll do next. So therefore, you actually cannot scout that if he goes this way, he'll do that because he doesn't know. The other one that someone said to me about Kelly I love was that the only thing about Kelly is that every play has to be like a Monet. Like, he just wants every play to be the most artistic, beautiful potential in the world. Like, every now and then, like, just making the X's and O's boxes for tic-tac-toe is fine in basketball. But he wants everything to be like a Chuck Close or a Monet or something else out there when he's out on the floor.
That's a great depiction of him because he does really. I think he gets more excitement perhaps out of freeing a guy on a screen, or maybe a deft little pass behind his back, or somebody face cuts and you're able to give him a bounce pass at the rim. I think he enjoys that as much as he does scoring.
So how do you intermix Lowry and Collins and Kessler and Olynyk. Like, I think Walker's got to play 30, right? I would think at this point, and I would think Lowry's playing 30 plus 34. And like, what are Kelly and John doing? Like, there's like, how are we doing this?
Yeah, and I think that's why they pay Will Hardy the big dollars. Because you bring up a great point. I mean, there's a lot of talent there, but it's all different, right? You've got one of the better innate, just right out of the package shot blockers and rim influencers we've seen. Obviously, we got to see Gobert, but Walker's almost like, his ascension last year to becoming a guy who nobody really wants to shoot when he's around. It was pretty fascinating from the beginning of the year. Him, and you got Collins and his strengths. We've talked about Olynyk ad nauseum and his strengths, and then Lowry's a guy who we're talking about is really gonna blossom. It's probably good that Lowry can play a bunch of three, but those other three guys, you got to figure out a way to juxtapose, and that'll be an interesting part if you're watching this season, how the Jazz are going to do that. I think it's one that can be debated, but we'll see how they actually choose to do it.
And then even, frankly, Taylor Hendricks plays into that, right?
Exactly.
Like, how do you fit that?
Well, I think that's why what you suggested, reps in the G League may be probably fairly what we see early on, particularly because how else do you break that rotation?
Well, it'll be interesting. You actually just got me to wonder. I think the biggest question to me on this, it's going to get really interesting on throughout the year, is how well Walker and Kelly play together or not. And I'm not sure that last year was necessarily the answer. I mean, Kelly's weakness is he's not a good rim defender and he's not a great rebounder. So it would seem as though those two should play really, really well together. On the other end, Kelly's strength is moving the basketball, passing, playing in space, and that's not Walker's strength offensively. So I think this will be interesting. Last year when the two of them were on the floor together, we were about even. We were, I think, about 0.8. Even. And all of our numbers last year are a little funky, right? Because you just so many minutes,
different lineups. Yeah.
Right. Like, hey, when he was on with Jordan, Conley, and Markkanen, they were like plus 11, right? So it was really, it's quite brilliant. If you add Lowry to that mix, I believe it was really very good for the three of them last year. But then I don't know how much the three of them play together now that John Collins is there. Like, that's not necessarily a lineup that you're going to see a lot of unless you're starting that lineup. And most people's feeling is not. They were plus 5 when they had Lowry on with the group as well. All right, let's quickly wrap this. Before we wrap this up, let's talk NBA. Denver's way better than everyone else in your mind?
Yeah, I think, and they missed a couple of guys, right? But I think the two most complete teams in the West, particularly Denver and Sacramento.
Oh,
those are the known commodities to me.
And what's your thought on Phoenix?
I mean, Phoenix, obviously, there's a lot of kaboom. There's a lot of combustion. How will it click? Older guys, can Durant stay healthy? But pretty scary when you think about the pace they could play at, how efficient they could be, both in transition and in the half court. But that's a wait and see for me. But I put them up there, above everybody else.
What's your top 4 home court advantage first round Western Conference?
The top 4?
Yep.
So those 3 I would probably say that we've talked about. And then, what's interesting is if you really look at it, Memphis is a head scratcher because they're really talented, but they're missing the most dynamic piece for 25 games. And then just what is the culture there now? What did that do to the place? The Clippers, they decided to kind of run it back. Wasn't great last year. Injury, management, load management, still an issue. Golden State, 6 guys over 30, 5 guys over 33. I mean, really, 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 really veteran for the Warriors. I'm kind of intrigued by the Lakers. They kind of get new blood. Don't love per se, the Christian Wood thing at face value, but as a piece. And then Reeves kind of coming on the scene. They had Gabe Vincent, who I thought was pretty solid. So they're intriguing. So what I'm saying is beyond that, it's like, who is going to rise up? Who's it going to be? At this, if you know held my feet to the fire right now, I'd probably say the Lakers.
Okay, interesting. Some people think Minnesota
or Minnesota, right? I mean, can they figure it out? OKC with Chet now back, and they could be primed. I love their young nucleus. I mean, Giddey.
I do. I feel like it's a year early for them to make.
Yeah, probably. But man, I love the guys they're putting together when you look at it. And then the great Zion question.
Yep.
What's going to happen there?
I thought the FIBA might have exposed a little bit of the Brandon Ingram question, that he's just not like.
He's not him.
Yeah, right. Like,
he's good.
Like, I didn't put him in my group of guys who I thought might make a jump.
Correct. Because he just every year he's going to come out there and be a threat, but I just think he is where he is. He's just that guy.
I mean, it's loaded.
It's loaded, but you can see a lot of, one thing could kind of unsettle an entire group. So it's just going to be almost like Survivor NBA edition.
Right. And injuries matter. And the wild card here is whether or not Victor actually is just so good that they actually win 35, 40 games.
What do you think after seeing him? I mean, what's your...
Defensively, he's going to be incredibly impactful immediately.
Yep.
I think the Spurs will be gentle with him. I think he'll shoot a really low percentage. I think we all have to go back. Like, we got to do this with Keontae too this year. Fans are going to get so tired of this. But, like, go back and look.
I know.
Like, Durant's the greatest shooter in the history of the game, probably. He shot like 38% as a rookie.
I know.
Like, LeBron, I think, shot 42 as a rookie. Like, it's just super hard. So, yeah, I think he'll shoot a really bad percentage. And I think there'll be a lot of question of whether or not he might just not be able to make it offensively. But I think he'll be so defensively dominant. But I also think like I think he could shoot like 45% while dunking most of the time, and like his jump shot could be at like 22%.
The piece of the game that you saw in summer league that is just going to be is the physicality. Like, right. We watched it with Walker last year. I mean, those first few games, I would have loved to have been able to talk to him, but you go to get a rebound and you're get eating popcorn out of somebody on the front row underneath the basket.
I mean Rudy put him in the third row.
Totally. Right. So it's just a matter of now, like you have to figure out how to stand up physically first and foremost.
Right.
And that will be his biggest challenge. I think you're right. He'll look great defensively. He'll score things around the rim. He'll make some ooh-ah plays. But his big challenge this year is how fast as possible, how can I get stronger?
Right. All right, Timmy. A lot of fun. We're probably about we're kind of like a little less than a month away. Kind of great.
Yeah. And I only get to see you when you're home and tired, but it's okay. It's what we do. And I love working with you, man. Thanks for having me.
You're the best. Tim LaComb, everybody. Send him a big thank you at @LaComb on Twitter. We appreciate his time. Great insight this week. And this has been Locked On Jazz, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.